as we look at our tennis ball, and I'm going to have mine right here. And using some of these sample sample images, I'm just going to go ahead and divide. And you could take your time, make this a little more, if you need to pull out a ruler, if you don't want your lines to be, too casual, you can pull out a ruler, go back to pen, and measure them, and divide them the way you would want them, by the way. So I'm just going to divide this into half, and then I'm going to divide this in half again. And I'm actually going to go all the way down to the other side. And what I want you to do is, using that object that you brought today, I want you to create 8 different types of composition. And we'll go one by one. So in your sketchbook, each one of these little rectangles would become a page. So what we're thinking about is, if I'm drawing a tennis ball, and I can come up with creative ways of composing my page, what would they be? So for the first one, the next thing we need to think about is, am I going to use pencil? Am I going to use ink? And I want you to begin to work with a little bit of watercolor here. So here's my tennis ball. I have that for reference, and it's in front of me. And I have this shot here. So I'm basically going to start with what would be called a medium shot. So there's my tennis ball. I have a little bit of the detail that I'm going to add to it. And why not? I'm going to add the text. There we go. Now I'm going to add somewhat of I could think of a background. And here's where I want you to get creative. If you're adding a background, what kind of background should that background be? And it could be anything. It literally could be anything. So you want to begin to think about, in this case, I'm going to make sure that stays. Actually, no, that's black, so I could come over it. And I am going to use a little bit of light and shadow. So I'm using a little bit of color, preserving some of those whites. And for the background, I'm just going to use, I don't know, some polka dots of blue. Why? That's what I felt like. Oh, now it looks like it's raining. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Select the color that I want. I could have used lines just as easy. As this dries a little bit, I'm actually going to use a little bit of that shadow technique. So there's a little shadow right underneath my ball. And there's going to be a little bit of shadow. I'm going to use the same blue to add the shadow on my tennis ball. And I'm going to make it on clay since the French Open just ended. Now this could be very loose. It could be more detailed. Like I said, you could take your time with each one. And I would suggest leaving just a little space to just name your shot. And when I'm talking about naming your shot, you can name this the Avery shot, or the Debbie shot, or the Isis shot, any shot. Because in the end, you're going to make it yours. That's the whole idea. And actually, this is coming out really nice with a little bit of technique going in. But I don't want to overdo it. What I want you to get is just a nice chart of ideas for composition, for composing your shots in your sketchbook. So there's my compositional shot number 1. And because I use watercolor, I want to make sure it's dry. And I'm going to label it medium. This is my medium shot. Sometimes, actually, what's the difference between a medium shot and a long shot? Or a medium shot and a full shot? So that's why I don't quote me on this. There's so many different names and rules for whether you're in cinematography, photography, or where you get the names from. For the next one, I am going to go ahead and use, or I'm going to be thinking about my panoramic shot. So that was interesting. Now I want to think of a tennis court. Now I'm working for imagination, but I want a long shot. So that means I'm going to have a long, deep horizon, almost curvature of the earth type. That's how far it is. And to have a tennis ball, which is a small little element, is going to be, I'm going to put it up in space almost. That's what I'm going to do. There's a tennis ball way up there in space. And actually, I'm going to make somewhat like a continent type thing. So it's way out in orbit. There we go. How am I going to make this work? Well, I'm just going to grab some more watercolor. And I'm going to make my tennis ball nice and yellow-green. And what I want to do then is bring in some color. But what you're thinking about here is distance, space, far away, full details of everything that's the context of the situation of where this is taking place, all in one shot. And then I'm going to bring in just a little bit of greens and earth tones here. Just in case you're wondering, I'm thinking of this as planet Earth as seen from orbit. Again, some clouds, and just to read it as a quick sketch. It's always best when you have a reference to work from. But from imagination. Remember, we're just working with the chart today. So this is an exercise that I would highly suggest you revisit with actual, say, portrait subjects. Pets are perfect for this exercise. And since I said we're going to go to space with this one, I'm really going to go. Let's give the Earth a little bit of atmosphere. And I want to go all the way out to add some stars later on, maybe a moon or something. But there it is. So this would be somewhat of a long shot or panoramic shot, where you get a sense of landscape, the location where your scene is taking place. And as I mentioned before, every subject falls into these compositional shots. Next time you watch a movie, think about that. When you see the camera work, oh, look, that's a panoramic shot. And that one, that's a close-up. There we are. this is a panoramic shot. Okay, so for the next one, remember, no rush. Keep working at your pace. There's going to be a video, by the way. I'm recording it. So if you need to catch up and you don't want to stop now, continue working on yours. You can always come back. Let's see. So for the next one, we have the medium shot, panoramic shot. The close-up is going to be too easy. I'm going to put that right in here. And I'm going to make the close-up, let's see, go from this edge down to this side. And because I have a tennis ball here, I'm actually going to use this as my model. And use this side right here. Put some of that fuzz in there. We're really, really close. A little bit of light and shadow. And the context of where I am, I'm going to put this, let's say, on darker green like grass. So it's going to be interesting in a few seconds when I tell you about how we're going to combine some of these shots. How you can create an entire new scene. And there's always new ways. Every time I see a kind of a reinterpretation of a shot, they're not all done. There's still very creative people coming up with new ways of presenting a subject to us. And it is amazing how far creativity can go. Your point of view is really what we're looking for here. How you can let us see the way you see. Adding a little bit of shadow into it. And a little more right in here. Now remember, these are really quick sketches. The idea is not to make every single one a masterpiece. It's more about getting the sense of the possibilities. And there we have it. So I hope that comes through. I almost feel like I want to go back here. I almost feel like I should have done these with ink, because it is actually one way that I love to use my sketchbooks: ink, pens, and watercolor. It's just, especially for sketches like this. I'm just going over it really quick because it's bothering me. I worked it a little too fast. I put the color in and they blended and got a little bit dirty. So I gotta get back in there and fix it up a little. There we go. Just a little bit better. Just a little bit more color. Okay, so this one is the close-up. Now there would be a variation here. I'm actually going to go ahead and just do it with pen, as I should have done all of these. So we have a long panoramic shot, we have a medium shot, we have the close-up. There's one that's called an American shot, and it's very famous. It includes not a full-length body shot, and it's not a medium shot. It's dealing with the distance from you, the object, between the object and you. So this one's, you could reach your hand out and grab it. This one's definitely in your face. That one's way far. So the next distance would be somewhere between that. So a little bit farther. And let's see, I'm going to make, because if I make it smaller, it's going to lose a little bit of that sense. So what I want to do is maybe play with the horizon line here. So I'm going to put it right at the edge, almost like a sunset. And call this one the long shot. Or the full shot. That would be a better name. And as you read the details, obviously they get a little bit blurrier because of the distance. It's a little bit further away than this one. But because it's next to this composition, it may be, hey, wait a minute, what's the difference between those two? Well, it's less obvious than the difference between these two, and more obvious than this one. Now, as you play with different types of shots, compositional shots, you could also play with the angle, and we're going to go into those next. So the angle from where you're looking at the object, and we're going to deal with bird's eye, the warm eye, and your task is also it's going to be to come up with a new one. And I want to show you another one that I think you'll enjoy. And maybe next time, when we have an exercise like this, I won't pick a tennis ball as my subject. Usually people, buildings, like I mentioned, pets. But the sense of using an object and being able to arrange it however you want. So I hope you get the sense of this one. It's a little further away, even though I didn't make it much smaller. It's just getting a sense of the distance between you and the object. And I am having a little trouble with the shading in these. So let me maybe make it a little more extreme. Plus, you're going to want to wait till other watercolors are dry, or you'll have that little mixing happening. There we go. That's a little bit better. And if I want to make it even more, I'm just going to add a little shadow underneath it, a little bit further away, kind of like it's bouncing. And let me enhance this one. Maybe that's what's missing in this shot, that this one should be harsher, so I see it closer to me. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now remember, I'm working with the tennis ball, but this applies to every single thing, any subject you select. Before I move on, I'm going to actually do this also. Just darken a little bit. And now that looks like a finished page. Always okay to come back and retouch, add a couple of layers as the paint dries. I'm adding a few ink lines, a few little details, fuzz. There we go. Okay, so moving on to the second part here. Now we're going to be dealing more with angle. So I could be looking at my subject from above or from below. Those are the easy ones, the bird's eye or the ant eye or the worm eye. So coming up with creative expressions of that. First one, let me sketch it out in pencil first before I go in with ink. I'm going to work with the bird's eye. So we did have some great examples of bird eye earlier. So obviously I want to see there's going to be no horizon. I'm looking down. So I'm going to visualize kind of a tennis court at an angle right there. So there's the lines of the court. And that's how far it is. There's the net. So here's a little bit of perspective. So I could see the net, and the way I'll finish it up is when I add the shadows. There's the lines. So you can begin to see how, oh, look at that. We're looking from way up above. And we could put a player over here with the racket. And there's the ball. Let's put the ball right coming up and over. Right in there. A little bit closer to us than to the players. There it is. Now what else can I use over here? I could use crowd, or I could use trees. Very small, tiny trees to give us even more of a sense of we're way, way up there. A car or a parking lot, something else. Start out with some of the outer color. I'm going to start getting a little more playful with color, so I'm going to add some winter colors, maybe some fall colors, some purples, some violets, maybe a little bit of reds over here. I'm going to make the court a clay court once again. Just trying to preserve some of those lines, the white lines. And I could come back and add some shadows. That'll give it a lot of depth, a lot of distance. When it starts making sense, notice how ideas just, all over. They just begin to flow and flow. Make sure you take notes as you work on some of these composition shots, composition projects. Make sure to take notes and sketch them out, because they're priceless. Those ideas are priceless. Sometimes it could be something you feel like you dreamt. It feels like it's coming right out of a dream. And then a couple of minutes later, wait, what was it? I forgot already. You don't want that to happen. Right? If it's ever happened, you know how it feels. Adding a little bit of greenery to the trees down here. And then to the ball. We have a nice yellow-green ball. I'm going to add a little bit of shadows to this player over here. And to the net. Oops, there goes that spill. It was very wet still. But there's the net. Get a little bit of shadow there. Feels like. And when it dries, I'll come back over it with some ink lines. That'll make it stronger. So that's our bird's eye view. Way, way up above. Next, I'm going to work on a worm. So sometimes closing your eyes and actually pretending to be a worm, if that doesn't help, you actually have to get down there. If you haven't been down on your belly in a while, and then looking up, the whole thing changes. So you can see a whole different perspective. And what would that look like? So I'm going to place, obviously my horizon shifts. I'm going to see ceiling, lots of it. And I'm going to see the full ball kind of going away from me. Big. Almost kind of like coming over, rolling. And I'm going to add a little window way back here. With ceiling. In the corner. Maybe you can even add a person. It would make more sense if a person is way up there. Very tall person. And I'm just going to see the shorts and the leg right there. There's the knee. That's it. And just grabbing my tennis ball and looking at it from underneath. Very interesting. Where the shadows are. There we go. So it should give me a sense, and it could be more exaggerated. Another way could have been just buildings going way, way away from us. Like that. So turning this from indoor into outdoor. And there's the building. There's more buildings over here. So that makes it even more dramatic. And could you come up with a lower angle? A more worm eye angle? Absolutely. I'm positive you guys can. Another trick, and it's not a trick, it's just using the tools you have, using your phone, taking photos. So you take a photo of the object from really close or a little more distance, setting it down. If I were to take a photo of the ball as I place the camera lens right next to it, it's going to shift the perspective. You know, like those, what do you call those? I'm blanking out. On the door when a person's outside and they ring the bell. Anyways, the perspective is all warped. It becomes fisheye. And so the camera absolutely will work in the same way and give you immediate feedback and almost all the answers that you need for a new composition shot. There's I just came up with one. I just came up with mine. See, that's how creativity works. So this one down here that I'm saving a spot for, this is the one where you're going to have to come up with your own. And I just came up with mine. And like I said, I better write it down before I forget. And I just named it too. I came up with the name for it. Did I invent it? No. I just thought it would be funny. So just adding a little kind of urban, concrete gray type. A little bit of blue sky, so we get a sense that, okay, this is taking place outside. Maybe a little bit of clouds and sky. And there's my warm eye, anti kind of view. And then there's a leg and some shorts. Let's make these shorts red, and we're going to make them Nike. There we go. Some skin tone. Have not dealt with any type of shadows yet. And that'll do it right there. Bringing in just a little bit of shadow. So I'm underneath it and it's shadows all towards me. That's what it felt like. As I put my face right next to the tennis ball and I looked up, I saw these interesting shadows kind of going away from me towards the light. And just slowly giving a little gradation there. So obviously there's going to be a little bit of shadow right under here. And all in this area here. Placing us really, really close to the subject. So that is my warm eye or ant-eye view. Now let's see if I can go back over some of these ink lines while they dry. Give you guys a few more minutes. And at the same time, you're definitely working on your techniques, sketching, coloring. How you approach your sketchbook as a way to visualize all of your ideas. And one thing I wanted to mention, what you're doing also is developing your line. All we're trying to do is lines, arranging lines to create compositions So your line becomes your voice. You notice how every person has a different way of speaking? And by that I mean their volume, their accent, their speech pattern, the choice of words, their pace. In drawing, your lines are giving us a sense of that same exact thing, the way you're communicating your ideas through lines. Okay. So we have our medium shot, panoramic shot, long shot, close up, bird's eye view, a worm eye view, or the ant eye view. Now this next one, what I want you to do is this. There's all different types of combinations. So if you take one of these, bird's eye view, ant eye view, and sort of shift the angle a little bit and mix it with a long shot or close up. So notice how mine here, this is almost like a panoramic. But what if I do a close up bird eye view? Because this is kind of a close up worm eye view. Or what if I do a medium shot worm, or a long shot worm, or a, well, this again, close up worm. But mixing or coming up with just a little bit off, playing off of these, two of these. So the angle and the distance, and come up with one here. Maybe one that we have not done. So I'm feeling like I've done too many panoramic and too many that are too close to close up. So if I do a bird's eye view that's a medium shot, for example, how would I come up with that? So actually, I think I have the perfect example. And it'll involve a player. Maybe. Just checking a few little things here in terms of images. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that one. I'm going to do a medium shot combined with a bird eye view. There we go. Something simple. Trying to visualize where I'm putting the ball. And that's what I will call it. So medium shot, I'm going to have somewhat of a good distance. It's going to be close, but not like a close-up. I'm going to place it right in here. It could be somewhat of a medium shot or a long shot. And then the angle is going to be bird's eye view, so I'm going to put the player down here. Sticking out the racket. Obviously, as always, if you have a reference, it's going to work better for you. So that's where you bring in your phone, your camera, and take photos to kind of get a sense of what the angles would look like. Always best to work with the reference. So here, working a little bit from how would this look like? Just giving them a little bit of the headband. Here comes the racket. Bending the elbow. Kind of running towards the ball downwards so the legs go away. And also the lines of the tennis court going. See, actually, they should be more angled, so no horizon. Somewhat like going away from us. Getting thinner. There's somewhat of a bird's eye view. I could have made it even smaller where you barely see the feet. Hopefully you make sense here. But you get the idea. Just combining angles and distance and how that can solve a composition shot to make it playful, more dramatic. And you're asking yourself, well, how would I use this? The key is we use it all the time. We use it all the time. And the thing is, are we sticking to more of standard types of shots? If we're doing, say, portraits, how can I actually add a little bit of interest by not maybe making it so exaggerated, but thinking about angles and distance? And you look back at art history, you'll see how compositions changed all through the ages. When you think of Renaissance paintings, and then you think of the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa, by the way, first painting ever to use that composition. So I've been making all of these quartz clay. I'm going to make this one grass. Just a little darker grass, maybe. And again, you have to play with light and shadow, obviously, for all of these sketches. Coming up with how light is behaving. Just a little bit will change everything for you. And I'll just do some kind of tree lines back here. Smaller trees, since we're looking at them from above. Kind of mixing in a little bit with the ball here. And there we go. A little bit of sky. A nice sunny day. And it's a bird's eye, but it's not as high. This bird could almost get hit by this ball. I'm just going to make this racket red, like ruby red. Oops. Again, I'm not waiting for this paint to dry, so it's going to be a little messier. And the other thing I mentioned is how I absolutely wanted to do this with ink lines. Just added this, call it a bird's eye view. Bird's eye. And then this one's the worm eye. Some of these nicer, looser sketches. Remember, the quality of your line says it all. How much fun you're having. And there we go. Could add a few more elements or people back here, or just keep it simple. There we go. Okay, so for the last one, my suggestion is, what else can you come up with? Or just, do you have a favorite? And do you have another idea for your favorite? The one I came up with, as I was talking through this whole thing, and we look back at the entire composition, remember, just using a tennis ball or any object. I can't wait to see what you guys did. Is to, what other type of composition can I come up with that we haven't done? Is there anything else? Well, for some reason I thought of a selfie. So this tennis ball is going to take a selfie. How would that look? So I have to use my imagination, put myself in that mode of where am I seeing it from first? So what do they look like? And it is that. Closing your eyes, visualizing, what does a selfie look like? And it's kind of a close-up. It is looking up. And it has this sense, obviously, it doesn't play as well with the tennis ball. But it is looking down at it. So if you were working with something that somehow has a figure in it or a portrait, that absolutely, in art, we're beginning to see it, that selfie pose. It's part of our consciousness now. So what else is there? And that, with time and play, you're the one that's going to figure it out. So I'm looking down, somewhat downwards into it. Kind of a bird's eye view, in a sense. I think it needed to be lower. But I will label it as that, as a selfie. And I'll play with it more. I'll play with the idea of a tennis ball taking a selfie. Having that selfie composition. Being the center. Maybe even a little closer. That's probably what I missed. And how you deal with the background. Mixing just a few of these colors on my palette. And as I said all along, chances every single time for you to test and play and experiment with all kinds of different techniques. Not just the same one over and over. But play with pencil line, ink line, color then ink line, ink line then color. The way you use shadows, light. But you kind of get a little bit of a sense of selfie, just a little bit. And again, it's for something that was just visualized. not bad. I think the thing that's missing is the type. Some of the lettering. There we go. Just finishing up some ink lines. Getting a little more angle on this player to get a better sense of that bird eye. And there we have it. So there we have 2 pages full of composition solutions. And the beginning of just infinity of possibilities. And I mean infinity.